There's one truth we can all agree on about the Nintendo Switch. It is that it is a port machine. What's going on, everybody? I'm Jay. Welcome to Square Pegs. And I don't mean that as an insult. I know a lot of people like to throw that around and be like, oh, the Switch is just for ports. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. What I think the Switch does exceedingly well is house arcade games. There's a ton of arcade ports on the Switch, and I'm going to go over some of my favorites today. I don't know how many we're going to talk about. I just know we're going to talk about some arcade ports on the Nintendo Switch. So what do you say? Let's kick things off with one of my favorites from Capcom.
In my eyes, I don't think there's any question that the company that has supported arcade ports the most to the Nintendo Switch has been Capcom. Not only do we have some incredible Street Fighter collections, we have the Capcom arcade stadiums, and there's been 2 of them. Maybe you want to play a classic side-scrolling platformer. You just pop in Ghouls and Ghosts and go from there. It plays perfectly. It's just like the arcade version. It works incredibly well. Of course, you can also do some shmups. You can play Gigawing. Gigawing's incredible. It is a bullet hell that's a little bit more forgiving than some of the ones we get today, with a great look, a great sound, and just great gameplay. There's also something like Powered Gear. If you just want to hop into a beat 'em up, be a mech, and kick the crap out of some bad guys, that option's there as well. One of my favorites from Capcom Arcade Stadium 1 is Captain Commando. Now, I loved this game on the SNES, but I had never played the arcade version until I got the Arcade Stadium versions here, and it's fantastic. Talk about a brilliant beat-em-up experience. It's absolutely wonderful. My favorite game available for the Arcade Stadium 1, though, is a game called Pirate Ship Higemaru, which I had never played before. It's a little bit maze, it's a little bit Kickle Cubicle. It's just really interesting. You have to pick up barrels, you roll them into other pirates to knock them out, and you need to make your way through and collect items that come up. It's basically a high score chaser, but man is it fun. There's a lot of Capcom representation of arcade games on the Switch. We'll come back to them later. Right now, though, we're going to hop over to our friends from Konami. I was debating including this one on here, but seeing as how the Contra collection goes on sale pretty frequently, I figured why not. You not only get like a zillion Contra games that released on home consoles, you also get the arcade release of Contra as well. Pretty sure this is also available as an Arcade Archives purchase, so keep that in mind if this is the only one you're interested in. But this is super cool. It's the original arcade release of Contra, and it's neat to see the inspiration for the NES game here. Now, I had never played this until a few years ago, and it's really neat to kind of get the story notes and kind of the beats that we got in the NES and subsequent console releases of Contra. Super Contra is also an option on here, the arcade release of that, so that's an option as well. I just only captured footage of the original Contra because I forgot to capture the Super Contra footage, if I'm being honest. But it is available, so if it's something you're interested in, check this collection out. It's really fun. If it hasn't been abundantly clear so far on this video, I am a massive, massive fan of collections of games, and the Pac-Man Museum is a wonderful collection of titles. Not only do you get the ability to kind of like design your own arcade, which is really cool. It's limited, don't get me wrong, but you do get the option to kind of design how you want your arcade to look. You also have a whole plethora of fantastic Pac-Man games to play. Now, on here are some amazing games, and one of my favorites is, of course, the original Pac-Man. It's an absolutely, just everyone knows it. It's a perfect game. It's a brilliant quarter muncher. It's so easy to play, so simple to understand, and it just plays brilliantly well on here. My favorite Pac-Man game is Pac-Mania. Pac-Mania is a 3D kind of isometric Pac-Man where you're able to jump over the ghosts, but the ghosts also get abilities too. They're able to speed up and move quicker on you. It's a fantastic game, and the port here on the Pac-Man Museum is brilliant. If you haven't played it, it's definitely worth looking into. There's a ton of games on here. Some of my favorites also, there's some mobile games on here that are really great, like Pac-Man 256. It's wonderful. And it wouldn't be an arcade discussion during the summer of Sega without talking about the brilliance that is the Sega Ages games. Now, Sega Ages are a la carte games that you're able to purchase in the eShop, and there's a ton of fantastic options on here. First up, Outrun. The arcade port of Outrun on the Nintendo Switch might be the best arcade port that's ever been released of this game. It is nearly flawless. It's gorgeous to look at. It plays beautifully well. It is exactly what you would want an arcade port to be of one of the best driving games ever made. Game Ground, also one of my favorite games. This is a fantastic and really weird game from Sega's history, where you are playing as characters and moving your way through levels to unlock other characters to use. And as you die, you will lose the ability to use the character that you have unlocked at that time. Finally, though, the one I want to talk about, my favorite of the Sega Ages games that I have played that is an arcade port, is Virtua Racing. This is stunning. Legitimately the best version of Virtua Racing ever released. It runs at 60 frames per second, which is an improvement over the original. It is a perfect plus port. Absolutely fantastic. Now, as a rule, I am terrible at the Cotton games. And Cotton Reboot is no different. Now, you get the completely hyped up, completely redone, reimagined, beautified version of Cotton Reboot, which is great, and that's wonderful, and that's what I'm showing you here, but you also get the Sharp X68000 port of Cotton Fantastic Night Dreams, which was an arcade game, and it is brilliant. It's ball-bustingly difficult. It's a great cute-em-up, but it is difficult, so be aware of that. It's just a fantastic game, and it's so much fun to play. If you like shoot-em-ups and you haven't had a chance to play any of the Cotton games, do so, and Cotton Reboot's a great place to start. There is a physical release of this, so you might be able to track that down. I don't know what the availability looks like right now, but it was something that I was able to pick up pretty easily last year, so if you're curious about it, do look into it. It's a really fun game. Back to Capcom, and we're going to go rapid fire on this one because there was a lot of games I wanted to feature here. For Capcom Arcade Stadium 2, or Capcom's second arcade stadium, I can't remember what it's actually called. First and foremost, kicking things off, Mega Man The Power Battles. Super cool. You get this and the sequel on this collection. And it's really great because one of the things that is awesome about the Arcade Stadium games is you don't have to just buy the whole collection and have every game, maybe some you don't want to play. You can buy them a la carte. Now, it's cheaper to buy the entire collection and have them all at once, but if there's only a few games you want to play, you can do that. Mega Man The Power Battles is great. It's very simple, but the idea behind the game is you're basically in a boss rush mode. You get to play as Mega Man, Proto Man, or Bass. When you fight an enemy, you collect their powers, just like you would against the Robot Masters in classic Mega Man games. There's also Gunsmoke, which is one of my favorite NES games and plays brilliantly well on the arcade. It's really nice because you don't have to press two buttons at the same time to shoot forward like you do on the NES. You actually have 3 button controls, which is great. Knights of the Round is one of my favorite beat-em-ups of all time. Retells the Arthurian legend loosely, very, very, very loosely. You can play as Arthur, Percival, or Lancelot, and you go through and you fight a bunch of bad guys. It's great. There's also Saturday Night Slam Masters, which is a wrestling/fighting game, kind of like King of the Monsters that SNK did. And one of the characters you can play as is Hagar from Final Fight. It's awesome. It's super fun. My favorite on this collection, though, is Street Fighter Alpha 3. Street Fighter Alpha 3 is probably my favorite fighting game outside of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It's got a great roster. It's got brilliant animations, wonderful, wonderful music. I just love this game so much. It's not all just collections, though. There's definitely some standalones, and one of my favorites is Cruisin' Blast. Now, this is probably not the first game that comes to mind when people think of arcade ports on the Nintendo Switch. They're thinking classic games, but Cruisin' Blast was an arcade release, and on this version you can play all of the arcade courses in a row, and it's fantastic. This is one of my favorite games on the Nintendo Switch. I've loved the Cruisin' series for decades, and it plays so beautifully well with Cruisin' Blast. It's a fantastic continuation of that series. Just a beautiful game, too. It looks great, it sounds fantastic, the gameplay is bombastic and ridiculous. It's perfect. The SNK 40th Anniversary Collection is really, really well done. This is kind of the first collection, I think, that Digital Eclipse did on the Switch, and there was definitely some kind of foundations laid here that paid off in dividends in future collections that they managed. There's a bunch of really great games on here, though. One of my favorites is POW, Prisoner of War. This is basically a beat-em-up where you play as a character that breaks out of a military prison, and you have to go through and beat up the bad guys that captured you. It's kind of perfect. It's really easy to understand, and it's really fun. Next up, I want to talk about Athena. Now, Athena is, let's call it a divisive game, because it's not great by any stretch of the imagination, but it does feature a character that I love, and Athena is actually playable in the King of Fighters games, or at least a version of Athena is playable in the King of Fighters games. So it's really neat to be able to play the game where she originated here. I really do love, though, that we have the Ikari Warriors games on here. Now, these are fantastic quasi-twin-stick shooters where you have to move your character and kind of direct them which direction they're actually going to fire their guns at. Plays really well. They're super fun. There's also a ton of other games on here, so if you are curious at all about classic SNK games that aren't part of the ACA Neo Geo collection, check this one out. It's a great, great collection of games. Sometimes you just need to be the heroes on the half shell. And there's no finer way to play two of the best arcade ports on the Nintendo Switch than via the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection. This gets you the original arcade game release. And I'm not talking about the NES version, that's on there too, but the original arcade release, the one that absolutely blew our minds back in the 80s. And you also get the arcade release of Turtles in Time. So if that is your type of game, you are set. It plays beautifully well. The animation sequences are fantastic. The audio is great. Everything about it is picture perfect. This is one of the best collections of games on the Switch, and these are two of the best arcade ports out there. One of my favorite things that has happened on recent console generations are the Arcade Archives collections. These are amazing. There are so many Arcade Archives games out there. I want to say there's over 200 on the eShop right now. These are just a few of my favorites. Up first is one that I actually didn't know was an arcade game until a couple of years ago, and it's the Styanax. I had a Styanax on the NES, and I loved it growing up. I love it to this day. I think it's fantastic. But the arcade version eclipses it in every conceivable way. First off, from a graphical perspective, it's significantly better. The audio is better. The gameplay is much more challenging. The screen fills up with enemies. It's literally so much fun. It's fantastic. Splatterhouse as well has an Arcade Archives release, and this plays pretty faithfully to the TurboGrafx version, but of course that is faithful to the arcade release. It's a challenge, it's fun, it's dark, it's bloody, it's gruesome. It's exactly what you want a Splatterhouse game to be. My personal favorite, though, is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's Sunset Riders. Now, I had this on the SNES. I had not played the arcade version many times in the past, but when I saw that there was an Arcade Archives release, I jumped on it immediately. This game is brilliant. You can play one player, you can play multiplayer, either 2-player or 4-player. There's a bunch of different options on all of these Arcade Archives games that just give you different gameplay abilities. It's so much fun. Arcade Archives are just amazing. They're fantastic, faithful ports of the original arcade releases, and each one that I have played hits a home run. There's also some really cool Arcade Archives that feature the Versus versions of NES games that are worth checking out as well. Versus Excitebike in particular is fantastic. You can't go wrong with the classics, and the Atari 50 collection is, for someone who is not a huge fan of Atari, it's a nearly perfect collection, because not only do you get a whole bunch of games, and that's great, but the game itself, the actual packaging itself, the Digital Eclipse and Atari put together, is a history lesson on this incredible company, this massive industry-shifting occurrence that happened back in the 80s and 70s. And there's some great games on here. 3 of my favorite arcade games on this collection. First up, Millipede. This is just brilliantly simple to understand. You move around in your area that you're able to move around in, you shoot, you destroy the millipede, you fight the spiders that come through. It's really, really simple. I also really enjoy Warlords. Now, Warlords is super cool because you have to move around on your corner of the screen to knock back attacks from your opponents to get them to ricochet back to take out their walls. It's really addictive and really simplistic, but it's so hard to master. Like, it's such a simple idea, but it's very, very difficult to just kind of master completely. My favorite, though, is Food Fight. I've loved Food Fight for years, and this is as basic and simple to understand as you possibly can get. You need to go collect the ice cream cone. That's the entire goal of the game. Now, in order to do so, you're going to have to pick up food and throw it at the chefs that are trying to attack you, and it's a super fun game to play, and it plays brilliantly well on the Switch. It's exactly what I wanted. It's a picture-perfect arcade port of one of my favorite games. Maybe you're a huge SNK fan and you're looking for some standalone games, kind of like the Arcade Archives, and that's where the ACA Neo Geo games come in. Now, there's a ton of these available as well. Some of my favorites, we're going to start things off with Money Puzzle Exchanger. Now, this is a puzzle game where you have to collect coins and match them up to change them into different denominations to basically just whittle things down until you're matching 500 pence pieces, and then you're throwing them across the screen to your opponent. It's a classic puzzle game. It plays a little bit like Puzzle Bobble competitively, where you're tossing different things onto the other side. It's just fantastic. I've loved it for years. I also love Metal Slug X. There's a ton of Metal Slug games on the Nintendo Switch, and Metal Slug X is one of my favorites. Just looks and plays brilliantly well. The gameplay is always paramount in Metal Slug, but that's almost eclipsed by the look just because the graphics in the games are so amazing. I wanted to talk about a fighting game real quick, and one of the best on the ACA Neo Geo collection is Garou Mark of the Wolves. Now, this was originally an arcade release. It also came out on the Dreamcast. And this is basically Fatal Fury, but in the future, where you play as the primary protagonist is Rock Howard, Geese Howard's son. You can also play as an older Terry Bogard. There's some other characters as well that are legacy characters from the original Fatal Fury series. It's brilliant. It's a fantastic game, and it just plays so beautifully well. I'm playing all these games with the CandyCon, the controller I got from GameStop a couple of weeks ago, and it plays beautifully well. The Hall effect sticks and triggers are magnificent for all of these games. Not to be outdone, Capcom also released a fighting collection. Now, yes, they also released the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, which is not featured on this, although there were some arcade ports on there. But the fighting collection is really cool because we got a bunch of games released on the Switch that we probably wouldn't have in any other way. First and foremost, we got Red Earth, which is super cool and not something that I ever played before. And I loved being able to play as characters that I had seen in the background of other games, but never had a chance to play here. This is a larger-than-life fighting game. You get to play as one of the main characters. There's 4 you can choose from. You fight gigantic bosses, and as you go, you're going to keep moving through the map to fight other giant bosses from Myth. One of the other games I really like on here is Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix, and it's just perfect. It really is just perfect. It's a wonderful experience, fantastic, simplistic, and easy to pick up. It's just a wonderful fighting game that was a lot of fun to play in arcades and plays beautifully well here. But the highlight of the fighting collection is that you get literally every Night Warriors or Darkstalkers game released. It's amazing. There are so many to choose from, so many different ways to play the game, so many amazing characters to experience. It's just a wonderful port, a wonderful collection of games. It's magnificent.
There you have it, some of my favorite arcade ports on the Nintendo Switch. I'd love to hear from you, though. Let me know in the comments down below what some of your favorites are. There's so many out there. Like the Arcade Archives, the Sega Ages, the ACA Neo Geo series. There's a ton of amazing arcade ports. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorites are. Till next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you stopping by. Click the like button down below if you enjoyed this video. Click the subscribe button if you really enjoyed it and you want to stick around. And until next time, remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.